Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily. That's what we're calling our readings through the Johnson edition. All 1,775 poems of Emily Dickinson contained in that volume. We turn now to a much anthologized, much debated poem, poem number 211, Come Slowly, Eden. Now, one of the things that we love about Emily, we've said this so many times already in our study, is that there's so much room for ambiguity, and it's often difficult to know exactly what it is that she's talking about. Some have referenced this poem as another poem about poetry and the acceptance or the rejection of her poetry. Many others will read this poem, and I'm certain that a good number of you will read this poem and say, Emily's clearly playing around with sexual longing and possibly even sexual fulfillment. Now, when the poem was actually published in 1890 by the publisher Higginson, he called this apotheosis, that is to say, climax. And I mean, obviously, the poem can be read as spiritual climax, or obviously sexual climax, or egoic climax. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. And this is, again, why we love Emily's stuff so much, and why we called our series Chats with Emily, because it's never totally clear what's going on in these poems, and this is what makes so many of us love it so much. The great scholar Ruth Miller thought that this poem was about publishing and the acceptance or the rejection of Emily's work, possibly a poem for Sam Boyles. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm really hopeful that you've already worked with our set of introductory comments. I'm really hopeful that you've already read the preceding 210 poems. We just finished with poem 210, The Thought Beneath So Slight a Film. And you'll remember in that poem, a poem about poetry, that Emily will make the argument that her stuff is most powerful when it is what? Beneath a slight film. Ambiguous, uncertain as to exactly what's going on. This is one of the reasons that I think so many people are put off by her poetry, and I think this is the reason why so many of us love her poetry so much, because the poem can be interpreted in so many ways. Now, there is a connection here to Sam Boyles. Boyles gave her a jasmine, and this jasmine was somewhat significant. There is some referencing as well to the flower, and the flower was in fact it was celebrated within the family, within Emily's family, and in fact there was a bit of jasmine 4 years after his death. The poet sent a spray of pressed jasmine to his son Samuel J. Boyles with the words, quote, "A tree your father gave me bore this priceless flower. Would you accept it because of him?" End quote. This request is followed by a poem elegizing Boyles, which ends with the assertion that his immortality is secreted in a star. Poems number 1616, that is the jasmine blossom. And in fact, sometimes this jasmine was called the poet's jasmine. So there is a connection here. Of course, jasmine is often considered the flower of passion, no doubt. Now, in many ways, we're back to Milton, and back to Milton's Eden, and what some have caught on to, this notion of the fortune and fall. In other words, remember, Milton, we've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. Milton argues that of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree brought death into the world and all woe, till one greater. In other words, the argument of Milton's theodicy, the explanation for pain, suffering, sin in the world, is that it allows for Christ's salvation to come vis-a-vis Christian theology. Now, again, it isn't totally clear that Emily is playing around with sexual longing here and fulfillment, but it's pretty easy to get there, and many readers have. Now, one of the places I'm going to go, because we gave full lectures on every poem of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, you'll remember that I made a big deal of the very first word of the deathbed edition, the 1892 edition of Leaves of Grass. You'll remember that the very first word of that volume was the word come. Notice the first word here of this poem, Come Slowly, Eden. And by the time we get to Song of Myself, and especially passage 5, I'm going to make the observation that in 1855, when that section gets published, as I said in my comments at learnstrong.net, you can run all that to ground if you want, that was some radical stuff. I think there's something really interesting going on between a passage from Song of Myself 5 and this poem. With that in mind, let's just read the poem now. We've given enough background information to enjoy it. Come slowly, Eden, lips unused to thee, bashful, sip thy jasmines as the fainting bee. Reaching late his flower, round her chamber hums, counts his nectars, enters, and is lost in balms. Now let's just point out the genius of the rhythm of this poem. Notice there's only one 3-syllabic word here with jasmines. By the way, the spelling here is the spelling of horticulturalists, so she'll use that older spelling so that she can get the 3 syllables in the word. Everything else, notice in this poem, is 2 or 1 syllabic words, right? Again, notice the beginning word, the word come. Emily, like Walt, was very interested in this word, a word of invitation, etc. She'll use this word at least 140 different poems, so it's quite remarkable. And then notice it's this use of the word slowly. In other words, I want this to arrive, but I want it to happen gradually, slowly. Again, some people, like Ruth Miller, have commented that, oh, this is about her desire to be published, but to not have it happen too quickly. Others obviously have said, I think there's clearly some kind of sexual understanding of what's going on here. And again, Emily, and this is what makes Emily so fascinating, is that she'll bring often the sexual and can we even say the theological together. Notice here the use of the word Eden. She'll use Eden in 17 different poems. And notice the very last line uses the word lost. Guys, I've said this, and I think I'm right about it. I think I wish that we could just have these direct conversations with Emily, because I think at some times in our conversations, our chats with Emily, she would probably have a very wry little smile and say, yeah, what do you think of that? I think she's playing games. I think she's having fun. It's clear that she is enjoying the experience of writing these poems. And notice we'll begin with Eden and end with Lost, which takes us back to obviously Milton and Paradise Lost. The use of the word Eden with the exclamation point suggests that she's also playing around with a Christian Miltonic idea that it is the loss of Eden that is so tragic and yet necessary. But notice in this poem, it is the loss of Eden that she longs for, right? It's just she wants it to happen slowly. Notice, lips unused to thee. I mean, you can't read a line like this and not think of, for example, Romeo and Juliet, and you'll remember that she says you kiss by the book, and it's not totally clear what lips unused to thee could actually mean. And again, who is the thee that we're talking about? Is it Sam Boyles? Is Sam Boyles the master? As we've talked about in so many previous lectures, it is completely unclear. She then goes to the word bashful. 7 poems she'll use this word. Sip thy jasmines. And of course, this idea of sipping is fascinating, right? Is this a sexual kind of language? You know, is sip for smell? I mean, it's not completely clear. And then notice we're to the word, the simile, as the fainting bee. Now, it's interesting her use of the word fainting in poem 919. And we've read this poem a number of times. And if I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life, the aching or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin unto his nest again, I shall not have lived in vain. Notice this use of the word fainting, and then her use of the word be. We're getting set up already for poem 213, where she'll use the word be. But 230 is the poem I want us to look at really quickly in regards to the bee. Much connection has been made between this poem and poem 230. I'll just read it real quickly. We, bee and I, live by the quaffing. 'Tisn't all hock with us. Life has its ale, but it's many a lay of the dim burgundy we chant for cheer when the wines fail. Do we get drunk? Ask the jolly clovers. Do we beat our wife? I never wed. B pledges his in minute flagons, dainty as the tress on her deft hand. This identification of Emily as B, we're to it. Then she uses the word reaching late his flower. And when we read the Song of Myself passage, number 5, well, you know what, let's go ahead and enjoy that one now. You guys will remember that we did this set of lines, and it was obviously extremely controversial. I mean, this is the reason why Melville would have serious problems with this poem. I mind how once, this is Song of Myself passage 5, I mind how once we lay such a transparent summer morning, how you settled your head athwart my hips and gently turned over upon me and parted the shirt from my bosom bone and plunged your tongue to my bare stripped heart and reached till you felt my beard and reached till you held my feet. Of course, this idea of, are we speaking sexually here? Are we speaking about poetry and inspiration? Go back and you can look at our lecture in detail. But notice, it is this idea of reaching. Reaching, notice the word late will set up lost later. Late his flower, and we've already seen Emily's use of flowers, jasmine obviously even in this poem, round her chamber hums. By the way, notice all these sounds that will sound like a bee, right? The in of round, the im of chamber, the im of hums, the in of counts, his nectars. It's an amazing tour de force here. Reaching late his flower, round her chamber hums, counts his nectars, enters, and is lost in balms. Now again, we cannot help but enjoy the irony of the word lost. Notice, comes slowly Eden. I want Eden to be lost. Now again, are we speaking about her longing to have her stuff published, or are we speaking rather about the longing for some kind of sexual fruition and the like? Now, think about, let's look at a few poems that we're about to hit. Like, for example, poem 270. We'll play this game. One life of so much consequence, yet I, for it, would pay my soul's entire income in ceaseless salary. One pearl to me so single, that I would instant dive, although I knew to take it could cost me just a life. The sea is full, I know it. That does not blur my gem. It burns the strength from all the roe, intact in diadem. The life is thick, I know it. Yet not so dense a crowd, but monarchs are perceptible far down the dustiest road. How about 249? We're going to play this one as well out here in a little bit. Wild nights, one of Emily's most famous poems. Wild nights, were I with thee, wild nights should be our luxury. Futile the winds to a hardened port, done with the compass, done with the chart, rowing in Eden, the sea. Might I but moor tonight in thee. Some have seen this as one of the most explicitly sexual poems to possibly sue. This idea, then, of a poem about passion and about love is a longed for Eden. I think that's a clear message. And of course, you can read this as, in line with this is my letter to the world who never wrote to me, judge tenderly of me. At 2b again, notice how she moves from metaphor to simile, from jasmine to bee. It's quite a remarkable thing. And again, all of the sounds. This is one of those poems that it's really fun to kind of enjoy reading. Now, as we move to 3a, I've already mentioned, obviously, Walt Whitman's Song of Myself 5. We're going to come back to these ideas when we meet poem 453, poem 506, and then we just mentioned 249 with Wild Nights. Now, the great scholar Farr has pointed out the relationship with Cole's famous painting, The Garden of Eden, as well as expulsion from the Garden of Eden in her classic text, Passion, of Emily Dickinson. I very much recommend that study to you as well if you're very interested in how Emily plays the game. Finally, to relate to a poem like this, what was a time that you lost Eden, and yet somehow it was accounted for you amazing? It was great. And to what degree is Emily's ambiguity challenging you? I hope so. I hope you're having fun. Thank you.